Alex, good morning. Thanks so much for coming into the studio. I really appreciate it. So, big day yesterday, another major race in the horse racing calendar. The Grand National was give or take a month ago. You came in and talked about that. But obviously, the Derby it's a flat race, so there's no jumps involved. So, as I understand, the main complaint about the Grand National was the jumps, and it's the jumps that cause the risk and the potential injury occasionally to horses. So, what's wrong with flat racing? I mean, horses love to gallop, and this is on the flat, so you should be happy you got rid of all the jumps.
Well, a horse dies every other day in the UK on a course, and just on Tuesday, Sweet Run died at Lingfield on the flat. So it's all horse racing that's harmful to horses. What we were doing there yesterday at Epsom was part of a summer-long campaign to really shine this spotlight on our treatment of animals, particularly where they are at harm. So whether that's within sports like horse racing, or on the moorlands for grouse shooting, or indeed in our industrial chicken farms that are killing the River Wye in Herefordshire. The way that we treat animals in this country is right at the heart of this nature crisis that we're facing, and that's what we're trying to shine a spotlight on. And that's why we're trying to raise attention to it. And horses on the flat do die all of the time. And actually, but we were also there to try and shine a spotlight on the hidden harms of horse racing, such as the way that they're whipped, such as the metal bits in their teeth, and such as all of the stress and harm they suffer in training and back at the paddock.
But do you accept that horses actually like to gallop? I mean, in the wild, horses will gallop, and they will gallop as a group of horses.
Yes.
I mean, they enjoy it.
What horses want to do is run, and they want to run as a pack because they're prey animals. And the reason why when you see a horse dislodge their jockey and carry on running is because they want to be with the pack, because they fear being at the back. So the reason why they run is what's in their head is not, I want to win this race. What's in their head is like, am I safe?
So, right, but so in a sense, even if they were in the wild, they would gallop, and very occasionally they would be injured. The thing about flat racing and indeed jump racing is that, I mean, the quality of care for the animals is probably greater than almost anybody looks after horses. And I know that'll probably upset some people, because actually most people who have horses, with a few exceptions, look after their horses incredibly well. But the quality of care with valuable racehorses, flat or jumps, is incredible. I mean, it's second to none.
Yeah.
And going up all of the time. Is your objective to stop all horse racing, or to improve the way that it's conducted?
I will answer that on what we're looking at with that care that people show horses, and we do absolutely agree that these trainers and jockeys and the people who look, the stable hands, they really care for these horses in the short amount of time that they are profitable for the industry. So about 14,000 thoroughbreds are bred into the industry every year. Only half of them make it to the race. What about the others? And then after their very short careers on the tracks, they then move on. And actually, even the Jockey Club and the British Horse Racing Authority can't work out where a lot of those horses go, because they're shipped on a lot very quickly, like used cars, and many of them end up in slaughter. So to answer your question, we do want to see horse racing come to an end with a transition to retire all of those horses and give them the care and companionship they deserve for their entire lives.
So that's clear. So you want to stop horse racing, which is a multi-billion-pound-a-year industry. That essentially, so once those horses transition out into the fields, they pass away. That's the end of all horses in the UK, basically, because no one's going to bother breeding horses if you can't get, in a sense, I mean, horses and humans have always interacted.
They have, yeah.
For centuries and centuries. But no one's going to breed them for that sort of industry. All of those 7,000 to 14,000 thoroughbreds, they'll be gone.
Yeah, but let's look at that. I mean, first of all, it's such a shame that we can't imagine relationships with horses without outside of that sort of profitable, money-oriented world. What we're asking for is actually, there are people who really do love their horses, but it's about £6,000 to look after two horses who've retired from the industry. We know it's expensive, but people do care. People do want to interact with horses.
That's the retirement, but then there will be no more horses.
There will be horses. There'll be lots of horses. There won't be this breeding of thoroughbreds, many of whom are cast aside before they even get to the race. Some of them are two who died in their first races this year.
Yeah, but many of those who then go to for example, to eventing. They go for children that grow up and ride out.
And then look at
the thoroughbred industry is the core of the whole horse racing community. And without that, the horse racing community basically would pretty much collapse.
But then look what happened to Kato Star, who was a fantastic race, a thoroughbred, who then went into a different area and actually had to be managed by this incredibly excruciating metal bit in their mouth because they couldn't react properly, and then actually died quite soon after that. The problem is, yes, what we need to do is reimagine.
I mean, you have to have a bit in what's called a bridle. That's how you control a horse. But we've interacted with horses for centuries, and we've always had that.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely right that we should be having this conversation about how we interact with horses in the future. And in a nature crisis where we're losing so much of our nature and biodiversity, it's
that's
right to think
separate to the treatment of horses. Let's go to London, where Frank's on the line. Frank, hi. Have you got a quick question for Alex?
Hello, Alex. I'd like to ask you. Obviously, you're a full-time employee of this organisation. Who pays you? I enjoyed watching the derby yesterday.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I'm not a full-time employee of this organisation. I actually volunteered with them for 4 years for no money. I get a little bit of money now that actually I donated to them and they're paying back to me. We're funded by a lot of our members, a lot of this regular supporters, and we're funded by other people who want to have this conversation about animals in our country and the way that we treat them and the way that we interact with them, particularly in the ways that we harm them in the food system and in sports.
You would ban fishing then?
Fishing is something that I personally don't agree with because it is actually harmful to these fish who actually feel pain.
What else do you want to ban? Good question, Frank. What else do you want to ban?
What we want to do is have a conversation where actually as a country we're making decisions together about how we treat animals.
OK, Frank, thank you so much for calling. Great question. We've got one message came in here which relates to it. So it says, dog walking. Occasionally dogs die on dog walks. So do we ban dog walking? Do we ban dogs? Do you want to ban dogs?
No, I mean, this for me is like whataboutism. What we're actually asking for is look, we know that people have incredibly close relationships and companionship with animals, and that's good and healthy because actually animals are a large part of our life and we want to enjoy their company.
So you don't want to ban pets?
What we want is relationships with animals that aren't based on breeding and profit and exploitation, and then when they're cast aside afterwards because they're too much money and no longer making any money.
Is my Labrador pet? That's bred and people breed them very successfully with great breeding lines.
For us, breeding is
an industry.
Yes, but for us, breeding is a problem when we have so many animals in this country in shelters. The shelters in this country are full.
So if there's no dog breeding, eventually there'll be no dogs.
No, there'll be plenty of dogs. What we don't want,
so you'll have wild dogs.
No, people will breed. People will have their dogs at home, have families.
You've got to breed
them. Pass them on.
Someone's got to breed them.
Yeah, but not for profit. What we're trying to get away from is exploiting and using animals for profit because we feel that is wrong, and it is actually a large part.
Is it the care of the animals or the profit?
For us, it's what we want are companionable relationships with animals where we take our obligations for them and with them really seriously, and that means not exploiting them for money.
But I think you've admitted that actually in the racing industry, for example, they do take the care very, very seriously, and they've made adjustments.
Sliver of the life where it's profitable.
But then I know many people in the horse industry who care for their horses incredibly well. I mean, my own mother was in the horse industry, frankly. Bless her. Sometimes I thought she cared for the horses better than me, but there we are.
Yeah, well, and that is the point, isn't it? Some people do care for their horses and their dogs and cats more than, because we really do love them. But what we need to get away from is these big multi-billion-pound industries that exploit them.
Right. For you, it's the exploitation, but basically it means you're going to end up with no racing, no horses. I'm not sure there'll be any dogs around.
No horses or dogs.
But no one's going to breed them if you can't use them.
But that's why we're here to have the conversation, because what we need is a conversation about how we can imagine our relationship with animals differently from one that is exploitative and that does put them in harm's way and kills the horse racing industry. Kills a horse every other day.
Do you think that your tactics are helping or hindering?
We think that disruptive protest has been a way to bring about change in this country. There are laws that we benefit from today that would not have come about if people hadn't stood up and done what they felt was
my
right.
Observation to you, and people have said it to me recently, yourselves and Justapol, you are rapidly becoming some of the, in a sense, the most despised people that are actually acting against your cause. We've run out of time, but Alex, I really do appreciate you coming in, setting out your thoughts and objectives. That's Alex Lockwood, the spokesman for the protest group Animal Rising.